In this video, we will explore the movie Frankenstein's. We look at the storyline, give a plot summary, and talk about the cast and the character. We also cover how the movie was made, the actors' performance, and share some general opinions. Let's get started. Some critics say directors should avoid making their dream project because the final result may disappoint the very people it was meant to impress. But Frankenstein is a striking and exciting challenge to that idea. The writer directors create something fresh from a story. We already know well they do this by staying close to 19th century source material. Many Shelley finished her novel in 1880s and his movie is set in the late 1850s, a few decades after time Shelley used. The Victorian era setting feels similar and allow Victor Frankenstein, the scientist, to push his experiments even further when bringing this character to life. The plot follows the themes of original novel. The film begins with Victor and his creations switching between hunter and hunted. The directors present this in a way that make the movie not only scary in the classical horror scenes but also deeply emotional. The movie includes visuals nod to James Whale's famous 1930s Frankenstein's movies and later Hammer films. Yet it never copies them too closely. Instead, it uses those inspirations to enrich its own storytelling. The creators played with greater sensitivity, is mistreated by his creator and into the world in the mystery. As he learns language and gains self-awareness, he begins to question who is and where he belongs. He sees himself a monster, an outsider with no home and no acceptance. The actor conveys both the creature's intelligence and his gentle nature, even in a small scene like when he quietly holds a mouse. Oscar as Victor Frankenstein brings a frantic energy to the role. Victor is not only obsessed with his scientific missions but also determined to prove himself right to his peer and family. Shelley called her novel a modern Prometheus, and the film reflects this idea. Victor believes he is creating the ultimate being which lead him to cross moral lines and earn the people also to him. Yet the performance award camp and allow us to understand Victor without fully agreeing with him. Mia Goth also shines as a Victor's niece. The film's darker elements are supported by striking production designs and costumes. The sets created by director regular teams surprise with bold and unusual visuals like a body that look pieced together with veins like tectonic lines or dressed with the bold green details. These creative choices give the film a unique and memorable style. The film visuals use Guillermo del Toro's favorite colors, deep red and black. One of the Vector dream-like visions of a winged Christmas angels which become a distributing image on scene. Alexander Desplat's score adds to the intensity. Years ago, Del Toro said in an interview that he dreamed of making the greatest film ever, but once a dream project is made, the dream itself ends. Fortunately, this movie is not a tragedy but a triumph, proving that he can dream again. This review was recorded after the world premiere on August 31. The movie released in the theater on October 17 and is now number 7 on Netflix. The New Frankenstein is one of Del Toro's most emotional films, from its grand gothic atmosphere to the tragic beauty of the monster. Del Toro's has often spoken about how the loss of his mother shaped his life and art. In this story, Victor Frankenstein is also shaped by tragedy. After being fired from his university job for unethical experiments, he gained financial support from an arms dealer called Harris. Victor gathered body parts from executed criminal and fallen soldiers to build the perfect human body, hoping lightning will bring it to life. When it finally works and creator is born, the towering figure who look as though he stepped out of a hunting insulations, but Victor is still unsatisfied. Victor also struggles with guilt and family issues. He clashes with his brother and fails to understand the creature's emotional needs. After an incident showing the creator lack of development, Victor decided to destroy him and set a fire, losing this on legs. In the process, the two fall in an destructive cycle. Vector tries to kill his creator, and creature trying to comfort his creator. Others who get involved only end up and hurt. The production design is remarkable. Vector's Labs has a great scientific inspired look. Though the movies run more than 2 hours, it stays visually rich throughout. The actor playing Victors and the creatures have strong chemistry. Victor begin arrogant and dramatic but remain fascinating. The creator, through often mistakes for a monster, is the emotional center of this story. Through makeup and the performance, he shows intelligence, pains, and surprising gentleness like Del Toro's and the other characters. He is innocent at heart but treated cruelly by the world. These combinations of horror and humanity is what Del Toro does best, and Frankenstein's may one of the most powerful achievements. Del Toro has wanted to make this film since seeing Boris Karloff's iconic 1931 performance. The movie adapts Mary Shelley's 1988 novels, beginning in the Arctic, where Victor Frankenstein and his creation chase each other across frozen seas. A ship trapped in the ice rescues Victor, but they are soon attacked by the creator, an enormous superhuman figure. The captain tries to kill it but fails. We then learn Victor's backstory. As a child, he suffered under an abusive father. His mother died giving birth to his brother William, which Victor never forgave. He devoted his life to becoming a better doctor than his father. Over time, he experimented with ways to revive the dead. He met a man named Harlander who financed the project, but secretly planned to use Victor's technique to revive himself. Harlander tried to stop Victor from wasting resources, but Victor continues. Eventually, the creator awakens and forms a bond with Victor through Victor's fears him. Elsa, who cares for the families, try to confirm the creators and criticize Victor's cruelty. Victor beat and punish the Victor creator for not developing fast enough. After sending Elsa and Williams away, Victor tries to kill the creator but burning the building, but loses his leg in the fire. Later, the creature returns to attack him on the ship, but the captain and his crew manage to intervene. The creator tells Captain Anderson that Victor has shared this story and now he wanted to tell his own. He explains how he first accepted into a real world after being attacked by hunters. The creator hid in the abandoned house. When the family who lives there returns, he secretly watches them. His son meets the blind old man living in the home. The creator begins helping the family and learns as the old man teaches his granddaughters how to read. One day, when the family leave to hunt, the old man asks their creator to stay with him alone. Together, the creator reveals himself. Because the man is blind, he treats the creature kindly and teaches him to read, including books like the Bible. Wanting to know the truth about this creation, the creator researches for Victor. While he is gone, the old man is attacked and killed, which devastated the creature. He continues looking for Victor and finds him on the night of William and Elsa's wedding. The creature asks Victor to create a companion for him. Victor refuses, saying he won't repeat this mistake. He fires a gun at the creature, but Elsa is shot as he tried to protect Victor. In anger, the creature lashes out, nudging William. He cries Elsa's body to the forest, where the two share a quiet final moment. Williams later tells Victor that he is the real monster, not the creator. Victor goes into the forest to find him. After the Elsa death, the creatures becomes violent and want Victor to feel the same pain he has felt. He repeatedly attacks but never kills him. Eventually, Victor apologizes and in the final moment asks the creature for forgiveness. The creature forgives him, kisses his forehead, and leaves as Victor dies. Captain Anderson protects the creature and helps him off the ship. The creature pushes the ship out into the Arctic Oceans, and Anderson tells the crew they are returning home. The film ends with the creature staring at the sunset, tears in his eye. After watching the 2.5 hour film plus the 45-minute behind the scenes special release with it, there is a lot to discuss. The story closely follows Mary Shelley classical gothic novel and on a quite unreserved note. We don't know what become of the creature, whether he lives forever or whether he ever find a partner. We only know he forgives Victor and survives. The film shows Victor as a boy who longs for his father love. Instead of creating his life through natural means, he creates the creator to prove his father's wrong. The create does not age normally and is unlike any human. Iconically, the monster director create become more Semitic than Victor himself. Just as Victor's father treated him harshly, Victor repeats the same cycle of abuse with his own creation. The movie presents two sets of father-son relationships: Victor and his father, and Victor and the creature. We also see the contrast between Victor, cruel father, and blind old man who showed the creature kindness.
The film explores complex emotions: love, anger, companionship, shame, forgiveness, all presented beautifully by Del Toro. His Frankenstein does not follow the pop culture version of the story but returns to many elements from Shelley's novel. In old films like the 1931 adaptation starring Boris Karloff, the creature was slow and childlike. Shelley's version, however, was intelligent and expressive. When Del Toro announced his film in 2023, many expected a faithful retelling, and while the movie uses the novel's structure, it also rearranges events and changes characters. Some parts are removed or rewritten. The framing device is changed too. In the novel, Victor tells his story to a captain named Robert Walton while hunting the creature across the Arctic, and the creature later shares his story with Victor. The movie modifies this by letting the creature narrate part of the film himself, giving his emotions equal importance. At first, these changes may bother viewers who want a strict adaptation, but many will find Del Toro's version richer because of them. While it doesn't make the film better than the novel, it does create a powerful and moving interpretation of Frankenstein. The changes Del Toro makes to Frankenstein are proof of his artistry. Even when adapting a story that means so much to him, he approaches it with honesty and emotion. In the foreword he wrote for the 2017 special edition of Frankenstein, Del Toro explained how he interprets the story and why it has always resonated with him. He begins by saying he would be foolish to think he could ever preserve the story exactly as it is. Frankenstein has been retold so many times that there is no single, correct version anymore. Even Mary Shelley revised her novel in 1831, 13 years after publishing the original 1818 edition. Del Toro mixes inspiration from earlier films too. Fans of the James Whale and Boris Karloff movies will recognize familiar touches. The creature's early, childlike learning echoes Karloff's portrayal, while his dark hair and sad expression feel closer to Bernie Wrightson's illustrated edition of the novel. In Shelley's book, Victor refuses to say exactly how he created life, so no one can repeat his work. Del Toro, however, shows Victor capturing lightning to animate the creature, giving the process a dramatic visual style. The film removes some characters from the novel, like Victor's best friend Henry, but adds new ones, such as Henri Harlanda, who resembles Dr. Pretorius from Bride of Frankenstein. Harlanda inspires Victor to explore a world of gods and monsters. The story, originally set in the late 1700s, is moved to the 1850s. This shift helps include early photography as a theme. In the film, Harlanda takes photos of Victor's creation, and the creature later discovers these pictures in the ruined lab. If a photograph can capture a soul, then the creature's photos prove he has won. In this version, Victor gathers bodies from soldiers killed in war instead of robbing graves. Elizabeth, one of the characters, is also changed significantly. In Shelley's novel, Elizabeth is practically raised to be Victor's wife and has little agency. In Del Toro's adaptation, she is more independent and curious, preferring science and nature over social expectations. She sees Victor clearly, senses his emotional distance, and refuses to be simply his future bride. Victor clings to her mostly because she resembles his late mother, which adds to his unhealthy behavior. Del Toro also makes Victor more malicious than in the novel. While Shelley's Victor is passive and frightened, Del Toro's Victor is consumed by bitterness. When William dies, he tells Victor, "You are the monster," highlighting how Victor's cruelty mirrors the way his own father treated him. The film draws parallels between Victor's upbringing and the way he treats the creature, showing cycles of abuse passed from one generation to another. Before the movie was released, many expected Del Toro to create a completely faithful adaptation because of his love for the novel. In some ways he does, keeping the broad structure, but he rearranges events, cuts some subplots, and adds new ideas. The framing story is also changed. In the novel, Victor tells his story to Captain Robert Walton while chasing the creature in the Arctic. Later, the creature tells his own story to Victor, creating a story within a story. In the film, the creature becomes the narrator halfway through, giving his perspective equal weight. Instead of frustrating viewers, these changes help the film feel alive with creativity. It's not a copy of the novel but a passionate reinterpretation. This doesn't make Del Toro's version better than the book, but it shows how powerful adaptations can be when they respect the original while still adding something new. Frankenstein has been retold for over 2 centuries, and each version reflects the artist who made it. Del Toro's version is full of heart, darkness, and imagination, proving that the story still has endless life. Dr. Frankenstein is usually shown as a grave robber, but in this film he uses the bodies of soldiers who died in battle. One character who clearly sees the danger in Victor's work is Elizabeth. In the foreword to Frankenstein, Del Toro describes Mary Shelley as a woman ahead of her time who searched for meaning in a world controlled by men. He treats Elizabeth in a similar way, shaping her as both Shelley's version and his own heroine. In the novel, Elizabeth is a girl taken in by Victor's family, sometimes his cousin, sometimes an orphan, who was raised to become his wife. She has very little agency. She loves Victor, symbolizes the future he abandons for science, and is eventually killed by the creature. In Del Toro's Frankenstein, Elizabeth is not Victor's fiancée. Instead, she is William's love interest and Harlanda's niece. She is kind-hearted but also a misfit who prefers studying insects to reading romance. In her search for something purer, she notices Victor's talent but also senses his dark nature. Despite a brief courtship, she loses interest in him quickly. Victor does not love Elizabeth, he clings to her because she resembles his late mother, also played by Goth. Much has been said about how Del Toro makes Victor a more malicious figure. His self-pity becomes spite, whereas in the novel he is simply fearful and irresponsible. When William dies, he tells Victor he is the real monster. Some viewers think Del Toro is too harsh on Victor, but the film paints him as an outsider, a theme Del Toro loves. In the book, Victor had a happy childhood with loving parents. Here, he grows up under a strict, abusive father, and his mother is the only source of warmth in his life. When she dies, Victor's world breaks. His interest in alchemy is removed, replaced by visions of a fiery red angel promising he can control life and death. The way his quest ends makes it clear this was no angelic power guiding him, more like a dark influence. During his university lecture, Victor presents his early research and speaks about defying nature. Del Toro often uses disobedience as a form of rebellion in his stories. When the creature is finally born, Victor has reached the peak of his ambition, perhaps too quickly. Del Toro's long relationship with Frankenstein can be felt here, echoing themes in his earlier works like Kronos, The Devil's Backbone, and Pan's Labyrinth. His encounter with Shelley's novel has been a long time coming, and after countless adaptations, this version feels like a lightning-charged act of reinvention. The film honors the novel's heart. It is not only horror but tragedy, romance, and a philosophical look at what it means to be human. Imperfect fathers shape the characters, especially Victor and the creature. Their relationship is the emotional center of the story. Victor is played by Oscar Isaac with intense, tortured energy. The creature is played by Jacob with expressive physicality and heartbreaking innocence. Del Toro's visual style is striking as always. His returning creative team, cinematographer Dan Lostson, production designer Christian Dates, and costume designer Kate Hawley, fill the film with rich reds and greens. Alexander Desplat's score is haunting and powerful, divided into a prelude and two parts. The story begins in the Arctic, where a Danish ship crew struggles to break free from the ice. They investigate a fire in the distance and find Victor, injured and near death. The creature appears, wrapped in furs, and attacks the crew. They fight back, shooting him and eventually blasting him into the icy water, but Victor insists the creature cannot die. He begs the captain to leave him on the ice to face his creation. Victor then tells the captain his story. He begins with his childhood on a once grand estate. His beloved mother died giving birth to his younger brother, leaving Victor alone with his cold and demanding father, a respected doctor. The story jumps to 1855, where Victor presents his early experiments to the Royal College of Medicine. The medical establishment rejects him, not only for scientific reasons but also for deeper, hidden motives. Arms merchant Harlander then appears and secretly supports Victor's research and experiments. Around this time, Victor's younger brother William returns with his fiancée Elizabeth, Harlander's niece. Her sharp mind and love of science immediately catch Victor's attention. Elizabeth wears striking costumes, bright peacock blue gowns, feathered accessories, and a white reading dress, making her look like a fairy tale figure. Although she appears delicate, Del Toro sees her as strong and intelligent, giving her more depth than in the novel. Her look echoes the haunting image of Victor's mother, shown in a blood-red dress with a long veil blowing in the wind. Elizabeth is a free thinker and stands out in every scene. The film's visuals continue to impress. One of the most stunning sets is the large laboratory built for Victor in a remote Scottish castle. The set is a mix of classic mad scientist design and Del Toro's atmospheric details. The lab includes a tall lightning tower, massive machinery, and chains running up the walls. It feels both ancient and futuristic, perfect for Victor's dangerous experiment. Victor chooses body parts from condemned men about to be executed, but as violence grows, he receives even more bodies from battlefields. He stitches together limbs and replaces parts until he completes the creature. The creature looks like a carved statue come to life, wearing only bandages. His design blends power, grace, and vulnerability, similar to the amphibious man from The Shape of Water. When he first awakens, he behaves like a newborn, discovering light, water, and leaves for the first time. Victor keeps him locked away out of fear. When Elsa eventually discovers the creature, he is instantly drawn to her kindness. She sees his humanity, even though Victor barely thought about the creature's life beyond creation. William challenges Victor, asking whether he ever wondered which part of a body holds a person's soul. Del Toro's love of the 1931 and 1935 Frankenstein films is clear. Like those classics, this version includes the moment when the creature escapes and finds shelter with a blind old man. The old man is thrilled to have company, and the creature's first learned word, friend, is one of the film's most touching scenes. Books soon open a new world for him. The greatest tragedy is the broken relationship between Victor and the creature. The creature's heartbreak grows when he learns from Victor's notes that he was assembled from discarded body parts. His loneliness deepens when he realizes love will always be out of reach. Hunters later attack him, pushing him into even more despair. His inner thoughts turn into painful, poetic narration. Del Toro closes the film with a heartbreaking sense of loss, portraying Frankenstein as an operatic romantic tragedy. "I cannot die, and I cannot live alone," the creature tells Victor during their final confrontation. His dark, soulful eyes express the same sadness Karloff once brought to the role. Oscar Isaac's performance as Victor is equally emotional. He is a tortured son trying to play God, only to watch everything fall apart. His downfall is as tragic as the creature's. This is epic storytelling, full of beauty, feeling, and art. Netflix only gave the movie a 3-week theatrical release before streaming it, but it truly deserves to be seen on the big screen. Del Toro's lifelong dream project now stands as one of his most ambitious works. The film adapts Mary Shelley's classic novel about Victor Frankenstein, a brilliant but arrogant scientist whose experiment destroys both him and the creature he creates. The cast includes Oscar Isaac, Jacob Elordi, and Mia Goth, along with Lars Mikkelsen and Charles Dance. After premiering on August 30, 2025, at the Venice International Film Festival, early Rotten Tomatoes reviews gave the movie a 79% rating from 19 critics. As more reviews came in, nearly 250 by the time of theatrical release, the score rose to 85%, reflecting stronger critical appreciation for Del Toro's bold adaptation. Based on 267 critic reviews, the film holds a strong fresh rating. Reviewers praise how it finds humanity in one of fiction's most iconic monsters. Many call Frankenstein an epic work, supported by Jacob Elordi's standout performance. The movie also has a 95% fresh audience score from over 1,000 verified users. The Rotten Tomatoes summary reads, "With his legendary visual style, Del Toro delivers a modern take that is gloriously gothic and heartbreakingly tender." Top critics continue to praise the film. One reviewer writes that this might be Del Toro's greatest achievement, an electrifying masterwork into which he pours his entire soul. O.D. Henderson of the Boston Globe calls it a horror movie, but also a heartbreaking tale about forced existence and the search for answers, adding that it is one of the year's best films. Glenn Kinney notes that while the movie captures the tone and spirit of the novel, Del Toro's bold narrative choices ensure this adaptation feels uniquely his. Leonard Maltin adds that James Whale's 1931 Frankenstein remains a classic, but Del Toro's version deserves to stand beside it as a film he was born to make. Other critics offer more mixed praise. One reviewer says Del Toro's direction is strong and stylish, but the story lacks the necessary spark. Another critic, writing negatively, argues that the film strays too far from Mary Shelley's original intentions. He points out that Victor was never a medical doctor, but a university science student, and that many story elements, such as Victor's education and family, were changed for the movie. William, who is a young child in the book, is an adult in the film and engaged to Elizabeth, who is Victor's future wife in the novel. This change weakens William's emotional purpose, especially since his relationship with Victor is barely developed. Elizabeth's character also faces criticism. Although she shows kindness to the creature, something the reviewer appreciated, some scenes feel rushed or unrealistic, like when Victor suddenly shoots her after very little interaction. The reviewer argues that Elizabeth had great potential, but her character was written off too quickly. While Mia Goth is praised for her past roles, the critic feels she was miscast here, often stumbling through lines and using an inconsistent accent. Jacob Elordi, however, earns praise for portraying the creature with deep vulnerability and physical presence, combining strength with an almost childlike innocence. His performance makes the creature feel more human than monstrous. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein remains one of the most beloved horror stories ever written, exploring human nature and responsibility. In Frankenstein, 2025, Del Toro reimagines Shelley's 1818 Gothic novel with empathy and emotional depth. His love for monsters, central to his career, shines through as he finds beauty in darkness and the unfamiliar. Despite countless adaptations of Shelley's work, Del Toro discovers new life in the story. The film begins in 1875 with Captain Andersen Nielsen of the Danish Navy. While struggling through icy waters, he and his crew encounter a badly injured Victor Frankenstein. But Victor is not alone. He is being hunted by a massive, terrifying man-like creature who soon attacks the soldiers on board. The Danish captain and his crew manage to capture the monster for now, but Victor warns that the creature will return and will stop at nothing to kill him. This is where Del Toro's adaptation truly begins, as the first chapter shifts into flashback to tell Victor Frankenstein's story. We learn about his obsession with creating life and how his ego drives him to pursue dangerous experiments. His early attempts, stitched together bodies, look horrifying, but Victor believes he is close to a breakthrough. Everything changes when Christopher Harlanda, a wealthy weapons manufacturer, enters Victor's life. Inspired by Victor's ambition, Harlanda offers him limitless resources to create life from dead flesh. As in the novel, the film explores themes of life, death, and creation. Victor's obsession is fueled by the death of his mother, who died giving birth to his younger brother, William. This trauma pushes Victor toward madness as he tries to conquer death. Strange visions of an angel wrapped in flames appear throughout the film, as Alexander Desplat's haunting score blends horror and beauty. One striking moment shows Victor gathering body parts from a battlefield. Del Toro's imagery is unforgettable, and cinematographer Dan Lostson uses light and shadow to create mesmerizing visuals. A chilling image shows Elizabeth's wedding dress soaked in blood, while another shows Victor's mother's pale body surrounded by red crosses as snow falls. These images highlight Del Toro's deep understanding of Gothic tradition. The camera constantly glides through each location, making viewers feel as though they're drifting through Del Toro's world. The costumes and production design bring 19th century Europe to life, from the worn stone walls of Victor's laboratory to ornate fabrics and glowing green and orange color palettes. Even the creature's appearance is striking. Jacob Elordi looks almost sculptural, thanks to Del Toro's long partnership with expert makeup artists. Victor's laboratory is dark, crumbling, and filled with secrets. Its giant machinery and storm-beaten landscape remind viewers of classic Frankenstein imagery. Victor pushes science beyond its limits, driven by genius but blinded by arrogance. He keeps the creature imprisoned, fearing society's judgment and wanting to maintain control over his creation. Over time, Victor begins to see the creature not as a person, but as a failed experiment. After enduring cruelty and loneliness, the creature turns violent and escapes, determined to confront the man who created him. Oscar Isaac portrays Victor with intensity, showing his brilliance, pride, and deep denial. Jacob Elordi, meanwhile, gives the film's most memorable performance. At first, he looks terrifying, but as the creature learns and grows, his human emotions slowly emerge. The film is unexpectedly emotional. One of the most powerful sections is when the creature finds peace for the first time, living quietly near a family's home. He befriends an elderly blind man, played by David Bradley, who teaches him about life, literature, and humanity. The creature reads about Adam and Eve, discovers poetry, and begins to understand the world. But when he learns the truth of his creation, he becomes enraged. By creating him, Victor has condemned him to an immortal life of loneliness, unable to experience the joys of being human. Mia Goth gives a small but meaningful performance as Elizabeth, who, like the blind man, treats the creature with compassion. She forms a bond with him that no one else can. The ending is bittersweet. It carries a message of hope and stays faithful to the spirit of Mary Shelley's novel. Despite a brief chase between Victor and the creature, the emotional impact remains strong. Ultimately, the film focuses on the monster's painful search for meaning, acceptance, and love, making Del Toro's Frankenstein a compassionate and deeply moving retelling. India and Das does believe that like the sun, life will rise again. Perhaps he can find a place in this new world. Filmmaker Deloro has done it again. He's made movies' effect on the imperfection and malformations of life is the transfixing. Inspiring or to Mary Karras becoming a Frank since even Gildisk was. Not till my 2025 bingo it started with my classic book club every year we read. Egoic and coincide with the autumn, and our very first pick was Mary Shell's classic tale in the 3 years since I have read it twice and am always amazed at how moved I am today. The poetic adaptations of Netflix's. What better way to start my Friday morning than I can say, and Jaka better pick up a few award this season. As I have previously started, I am much more of a reader than a watcher. So when I do turn to disagree, it's often because a pretty costume caught my eye. So first, major to the costume designer, because everything was a victory in her face for the year. Vibrant, almost violent jewel tones, and his symptoms go. Made for some very capitulating still. I also the unless paint almost every meat outfit to a Pinterest board. Okay, now on to the royal meat and potatoes, or should I say bones? If you are unfamiliar with the framework of the story, here is my book review for a quite fresher. Read that and come back. The film take gross liberties from the original text, but in the Sun contest is works well. Everything you think you know about the Frankenstein's monster is going to be returned on his head. Ultimately, body, movie, and book are a story of the created and his creator. I was not a predisposed to like Victor Franken in the first place. The book present him as a memo-nervous victim, but W2 advertisations made me hate him. Breo Oscar ESA for animating the show for faced character was never afraid to pretend a goatness when it suited him, but was, and he's hurting on his cruelty. Watching the performance thought not to be a cringy way. Uncomfortable in a you are doing something morally disgusting, and how can you live with yourself kind of despite being human, since denies humanity. To his creation, to all the films he don't, he dares, he abuses his blame, he. Once I put it best so simple but blue pure, I almost sure I am a sense to you. But just myself I simply am repeatedly. Frank says hide behind his own pride and go as to protect his selfishness, while I am not one of the condom violence, even I failed to abide of vacations vending monster broke Frankenstein's nose. What pleasantly shocked me was the tenderness which already surrendered Frankenstein's cure. Aside from the voiceover narration, the creature speaks very little until about the second half of the film. Think of him as a body learning to speak, because essentially that's what's happening. Has such no facial expression and tones of voice, a way of moving his starving 6 firefienders. Innocence That Sad did one excellent job of exploring the humanity of the creature as he moves in the world, grappling with the love, loneliness, ge. Even forgiveness does. Darkness between the man who was a monster and monster who was the real man is brought into the full light in their final act. Frank says evil itself asked the monster to accord him one final wish. The creature being the godness that he is granted willingly before the film, and with one of the most touching. The closing scene setting is a human hitting the beautiful. Score by Alexander This Aplot. Frankenstein is a movie that, while so violent it hurt me at time, overrating my guess, is also one that forces me to hope. If he does not scope up at least one award, I will like the most dumb ritualistly throwing some hand. The story of Frankenstein has been around since 1818. That sense that there have been the several of the horror classic. It follows a scientist named Victor Franken who gets fascinated by that, and he decided to conquer it. Using all his knowledge, he created a creature from the lifetime body server. As soon as he curses awake and abandons him because he does not want to take responsibility for his action over the years, the story has captivated a massive phantom, and one among those die hard. Forward Doro, the filmmaker, said at a hun time that Frank's story had been his childhood love, and I would like to make project he had wanted to make the movie for several decades, but every time he approached a production house, he was left disappointed because no one would take the risk. However, Netflix has finally agreed, and eventually agreed his masterpiece under Doro's direction. You might agree that the changes made in the new Frank S. film fit perfectly into the genre was created centuries ago, because it came from the someone who loved the original story since childhood. The 1980 novel and the films. bought to a creature as more monsters and directly those who have read novel. Arhano died after being abandoned by his creature. The monster decided to take revenge, so it ended up killing someone really close to Victor. Yes, we are talking about Elizabeth, who was Dr. Franken's finance into a book. Unlike 2025 dialogue angel between the alphabet and Victor was an integral part of the Mary Shelley story. However, Jaro is definitely making the alphabet Victor's sister-in-law. He also cleverly showcased Victor's feeling toward her, but she let him down after realizing what kind of man he was. Even Elizabeth initially loved William after meeting the monster. She devastated feeling for him. These things were not manner, so if not executed properly, they would have cast a blunder. So Del Toro indeed come with a new light and illuminated the entire film community with his vision. While I have no complaint from the sporting cast, I would also say that is the lead duo who carried this story. Our film on J Soldier, I have been an Oscars fan since moments and since the characters accused the M-Doctor of being the true monster. Not to be confused with Mary Scholl's Frank. Even this his latest adaptations, he was closer to the author's intentions than any previous version put to screen. What is a film? The actor, if not a man who plays God and who among that circle identifies more with monsters than Mr. Del Toro, the visionary Mycation director who started his career with Grown Arrest in Fairy Tale and earned an Oscar body for the respect and paid outsider in A Shape of Water. I want the empathetic approach. Feels less revolutionary in the Franken since most version of Shell story Fist Blood as opposed to his creator play less like a scientist as than a tortured artist by a long-haired invited him as a tragic figure crouched by the leg with a little girl near to the dancer. He poses a further. Now we get Jacob looking like an ammo jog or a wounded soldier, which is partly due as he's been constructed from the corpses of several. Ashuro says that Frankenstein's fateful creation has been cursed with life, cannot be killed, even bullets don't stop him, and must face the same existential crisis that confronts us all. No one has to be burned, but once thirst into revolt, we must each find our purpose. Early volumes of the Frank featured a quotation from Johann Milton's Paradise Lost. Did I request him maker from my clay to mood me? In this version, the blind old man encourages Vid's secret from their same job. In principle, Jaro has gone back to the book of his 2.5-hour magnum opus Titanic and still looks like it was made for TV. As much as that pain mean to say, technically Frank S. was made for Netflix's, and his teamwork will give it whatever theatrical run is contractually obliged to honor the visual effect when not rented for big second consumption. Alexander's displayed broke score, on the other hand, make up for its GEOR. Rest assured that Doro remains a cinematic master, and every costume set and propose crafted with a formidable imagination and a daunting attention to detail. The dose element may be best to the consumption via double key coffee table notebook, and Netflix's will undoubtedly delays for its award push as opposed to the fish's presentation afforded by DP10 large format camera. George as it may be, the entrain feels as if washing the through of people. So strangely, glass and white angle dances make Franken feel smaller when the point was conceivably to sequence more image into every term. DeLauro once entertained one notion of splitting the story into 2 movies, each told from a different perspective. First Frank Sins, followed by his creation revisionist version of event, but ultimately decided to present them one after the other. This made mid-movie and of Doors talk off of RQ proofs, and DeLauro telling the creature could barely speak in the Jim's original Universal monster movie, in keeping with his shell-based now movie opens in the acting with a ship dropped in ice, a monstrous figures passed by red essay refers what is surely holding J hair has disallerg, identifying the deeper theme he want to explore, but he can sometimes feels simplistic when presented in his film, unlike The Pink, which dealt with a Similar ideas of men getting live heavy involvement of woman or anything approaching a human longer does not necessarily mean deeper once. Again, Turo shows an unflinching attitude to violence, trusting our faces. And Viscus and Bone SAS. The son may actually be more traumatizing, but he is strangely stunted when it come to be depiction of sexuality. That proves CM intervettly comical in The Son, where Suck as Victor Franken sits in the top SH from the nearly the same Angel Dello presented Bradley Copper. Being in the nightmare bubbles obscured the important part, then the doctor stand up and we may as well be watching as in Power as Iluru blocked the scene using a random object to block his genital. Why is Dal Jaro so coy aborted nudity in a film very same character Dr. Franken is shows graphically say slicing away at careers a few minutes later. The same applied case he study. Wrapped in an iron cloud that effectively the status black figure who might otherwise the sexiest version we have seen since Andy Ver's fresh flash of Stain is the most silly frightening if this pose no sexual threat, and what is the abstractly attraction future sister-in-law Elizabeth Mia face toward him if lust is able. These don't seem to be the question that adult Churu has considered, while others, including the Schultz central concern, should scientific ambition Harvard for the unchecked experimentation that leads men to play God seem of relatively little interest. Perhaps a feel that the Jurassic Park warning catch us because man can does not mean the shit has been sufficiently disrected in other horror movie. Why is so dead here when Delu can explore different realm of psychology such as Sirs lives on their son and her wands are visited on Figure Generation, the movie's most civilized character in nature Franken not nor his creation but vectors dominating that Colini play his more understanding mother Clear, whose premature demise giving birth to his brother William may have inspired young Victor's experiment in concluding that no one shows a more allegiant fun reel than Del Juro to big sight of Claire's faces in the casket become the single most impactful visual in a film with countless to choose from. Meanwhile, her devastated young son comes across like a future serial killer, ultimately landing a pattern for his game and world. Her and character whose sex is in priestly the moment he is playing might have overcome in Handic have finally a Benedels as a Frank Sab, modeled after a similar Victorian structure in Yoroi but made to appear even more motor-worthy. The interiors are impressive. They may be too much so, to the point of the destruction. Exteriors are unconvincing, which undercut the illusion Tell is trying to achieve, such that the scene with the saying walls look too fake to be the upsetting. Frankson takes a turn toward the profound aboard. Halfway through, when Alone's breast into the ship end. Assumed G narration for the benefit of the Sandy Division captain is swimming. To hear him recount how he escaped a burning child twisting free of his chin. A slave elevated to marvelous superhero from the beginning. That creature displays extraordinary sedent and the power to withstand gunfire, and yet those very quilters make him feel more like right and a monster to modernize. Those centuries after Chalice found a fictional cure of mortality thus seem no closer to the saying that Dr. Frankenstein does not scream is alive. Now I know what it feels like to be God. Endurers. Telling the ancient characters who form only monsters play God, an aggressor who craves companionship fist with impossible task of living, becoming a frank sense even. Gay was not on my 2025 bingo card. It started with my classic book club. Every year we read a Gaddick Tom joke conkside with Autumn, and our very first pick was Mary Shell's classic tale. And every year since I have read it TW and am always amazed on how moved I am today. Deluros. Cinematic adaptab Netflix's, and what better way to show start my Friday morning than with a little bite of horror. Safe to say my eyes are wide open as coffee is all can. Say check up RO is better pick up a few award decision, as I have previously stated. I am much more of a reader than a watcher, so when I do turn to this again, it's often because a pretty costume caught my eye. So first major Kudos to the costume designer because everything was a Victorian as a Ford. Eyes vibrant, almost violent Joe Jones and Sam Jones gives made for some very captivating still. I have also on unable sharedly pinned almost every mold outfit. To a picturesque board okay now on made in potatoes, or should say honest. If you are not unfamiliar with the framework of the story, here is my book review for a quick refresher. Ready came back. The film takes liberties from the original text, but in this unmatted contest, it worked well. Everything you think you know about it monster is going to be the turn on its head. Ultimately, both movie and the book are story of this church and his creator. I was not a predict to like a Victor Franken in the first place. The book point him as a mopey nervous victim, but Waduro's adaptations made me hate him. Props Oscar Escar for animating with two-faced character who was never afraid to pretend goodness when it suited him but was unheeding in his cruelty. Watching the performances made me guilty, uncomfortable, not in a kingly vex, uncomfortable in a you are doing something morally disgusting and how can your life with yourself kind of despite being human. Denies humanity to his creation to AUD everything he turned he as he abuses. Hell blame Joe want your beauty to bear be so simple but pure I almost tear I am. Absence to you but to myself I simply repeatedly Frank says hires behind his own pride and go tries to protect his selfishness while I am not one of condemned violence. Even I fell to abide of the vindication when a monster broke Franks's nose. What pleasantly shocked me was the randomness video which flared Rajur. Aside from the voiceover narration darker speak very little unit about his secured second half of the film. Think of him as a baby learning to speak. Because essentially that's what happening. Allergies has ends facial expression and Jonah voice a way of moving his Ching 6 from feel like a charmed child that from the Glide Go Del Cora secret did not an excellent job of exploring the humanity every creature as he moves in the world grabbing with the love loneliness are even forgiveness the starkness between the man who was a monster and monster who was the real man is brought into full light in there. Final act. Franks and ever selfish asked the monster to accord him final wish the creatorial being the goodness that he granted willingly before the film end with one of the most touching closing scenes setting hauntingly beautiful score by Alexander's Display Fong is a movie that while so violent it had me overing my guest is also one that forces me to if it does not scope up at least one award, I will like the monster beelessly throwing some hand. When it come to the foration of sci-fi and horror, few stories loom as large as he marries Charlize Frankston or to modern primes. It remains a spark life that he continued to inspire wonder, terror, and sorrow in equal measure. Countless versions have retold that tale of a man who assembles life from the remains of the dead. But far fewer have it truly adopted Shalleck. Can it bring us to Gree in 1994? But no Dello as sad proclaimed Frank S. Devoted him to bring the favorite story to life in a way that feels both definitive and deeply to prov. Captures everything special, tragic, and scary about the novel and delivers it in a way that is bought quaintly that churu and also proves there was only one man who could bring the story life in a modern true Oscar Isaac Victor Frankston. The lessons of the obsession and the facing consequences are brought to life in a brutal deterse. Role as a monster is a tale of pain and his sadness that serves as a lesson in the patience and tolerance to part of much larger story that does serve as a foundation for what is a virtually perfect stuck in a distribution strategy that undermine the importance of what it presented for the world of film. When adopting a story that over 00 years old is hard to stand out among the array of existing adaptations and reinvention. Del Toro does his best to not necessarily retell the novel viber but instead to capture the spirit and the iconography of the character to do while also bringing something new to a story that has been told as much that explanation is not necessary to do this. First and foremost dare to add this character from the novel into more archetypical version of themselves. For example, Elsa feels more like a sense of numerally that Victor struggled to attempt. Baju's war is nearly impossible. She is a character who existed both within and above the world. A figure of puberty that no one in the film can match. Meanwhile, Victor Franken is evoking example of what happened when obsession corrupts a person to do things they may not have expected. Compared to the book D's version of the character feel more hyperized and well to make choices they are significant departures from the source material. They still feed his spirit and make the narrative even more compelling to the effect. Doro's iterations for the monster is more tragic than ever. I decide to see him as a villain in any capacity. If any aspect of the film feels slightly forced, it's the blood point regarding Christopher Henry, who unfortunately feels more like a speed bump than any trigger player in the Lord story and takes away from an already rich last final brilli. From Victor's lab to his nightmare of an angel of dead. The film is filled with the Doloro's unique vision that feels more like an earthly fairy tale and any real world. The film is dreaming from beginning to end with moment of nightmarish reality showing that no matter how much Victor tries to normalize the idea of conquering a dead, it's anything but ordinary, yet for the old ways the film feels like the Doloro. It also does not have sense. Aesthetic naturally fits well, so well that director vision disappear into the story, allowing it to breathe in the best way possible. Frank's scene can only go so far. This is a character film show and there are so many great performances that deserve praise. Starting with one other than Isaac Victor Frankenstein. One of the most fascinating aspect of the character is how do he represent the idea of someone who is so obsessed with the journey that destination can never match the expectation. Isaac masterfully showcases how his passion evolves into an obsession fueled by the loss of his mother. As a child, Duro subavs and the lasting impact of her dad constantly. Isaac is often sure. Drinking milk, referencing the importance of mother's milk as a child, and the idea Daddy Frank says would also create life is similar and of a man who does not understand the gravity and importance of bringing life into the world and is me. That can feast on 40 and term the real. Are to show, however, is DA produced as a monster. Not only does his ultra despair, intuitive prosthetic and a creature effect, but he also moves like a newborn with a body acting akin to Doro's long-term colleague. The physical acting is only part of the performances. As Eris captured the struggle of a being who does not understand what he is or why he is and longs or acceptance, and the companionship to the monster's F proves he stopped dead. But the monster also shows his stopping that does not mean that a person may not want it one day anyway. From the rappelling voice of Eloise, which mimics the many to depart and soldier that make him up to his doll, is sore, and it's hard not to celebrate the monster board as a character and is a tragic figure being intrigued by the final frame. Thanks to his performances would be understandable the film belonged to Ace. And there are plenty of other stand performances among the sporting gods. Elsa Bear brings so much depressives. Can easily root for or even a favorite. Her intelligence bought in academia and emotion is something to be admired, as even Monster does. God delivers a passionate but subtle performances. Harry Potter actor David Bradley is another standout in the small but wild role of the blind man who educate the monster. In short, Franken has some of the best Section 2025. And too deep. It's a shame many won't see it on the big screen. When adopting classic stories of any sort, there's always a debate about which iteration phase like the most decadent one. In the case of Frankenstein's, the Toro managed to blow a card of water and command his story in a way that make his version feel like the version to say don't disagree. So Victor Frank says or see a man so scared of nature that he tried to control it, and yet once he cannot understand or even desire what Come of it and monsters are bringing long-term follow and acceptance with B. Human desire, and it can only find violence and hatred. The line from the book I have love in front of like a wish can secretly imagine a like a witch. You would not believe. If I cannot satisfy the one, I will inject the other. Parade Story and 3 are less centuries planned on both side and 40 years. Franken is a Gothic tragedy and a powerful drama. Yet from an entertainment perspective, there's a huge level of violent action and prosthetic effect that are blooded unsettling. Duro has been actively trying to make his version of the Frankenstein for about 20 to 25 years. Saying this a film he thought about. Deluro has been mulling his project over for about 50 years, and his love of monster movies has been clear ever since. His first film, 1992 Kronos. His love of Mary Shelley's novel has propped up in nearly all his work. From the Gothic romance of the Crimson Pig to the closest he has came to making a universal monster movie with the Hellboy franchise. Franken has always been a part of Deleuze. And after an entire lifetime of dreaming about it, his passion project has finally been released at a North American premiere. A Frank said Doro mentioned how long it took to get the film made the way he wanted it, and this is that vision. But when you consider just how long Del Toro has had his concept in his mind and how dedicated he has been to making this with his vision intact, one has to wonder how winning the writer and director is to watch his vision for the good for the film itself. Maybe something did create great in his head for all those years, but is not nearly as effective once it's on the screen. On one hand, it's fantastic that a director like Del Toro gets to make his dream come true, working at an epic level we have never seen him at before, to adopt his iconic story. But on the other hand, with questionable pacing and the desire to keep as much of the original story intact, albeit while still adding his own flair, Frankenstein shows that sometime you have to kill your darling instead of reviving them. Taurus Franken 2025 has been one of most anticipated films since his announcement. The Mexican filmmaker has long looked at monster with admiration, empathy, and love. You can track it through his work on comic book adaptations, go romance, fantasy, and more. The tender care title Toro shows his monster establishes an empathetic foundation for his audience to view other. Franken 2025 feels like a natural culmination of his love for monsters, where the shape of war is about love across any barrier. This is more familiar where these other stories distinctly told us to love the other differences. This story asked us to see ourselves in his adaptations of Mary Stahl's landmark work. Duro opened his film in The Architect. A Victor Frankenstein is wanted in the snow. A snarling mess of a monster trapping its way through the tundra and toward the ship and give hope on him. Is here where Dolores showcases a thing affection with Jacob. Alice creature teeing to Dryo clothed in fun and his face mostly hidden by a hood. This is the creature at his most bestial. Once a monster is subdued, Victor is taking care of given Elodium, and yet he begs to be left on the ice. He is begging to be abandoned for the herd to take and end the cycle. After that, when the captain inquires about his story, Victor began to tell it the story of his childhood, his history, and his creature from it is the very beginning. Franken 2025 is a look at a monster and remain like we have never seen before on December 2nd. The awareness of Shell's story is alive in every choice that he makes, while subtle not so other adaptations also picked through the costuming and producing design are decadent. The G resort the cut of repented every bite of Rang has been created to bring to life a period in time by evoking memories of it. Doro has cored every scene to pick at every memory. You have a friend there as a story and as a visual language relaxing to where it began, while also leaving his own mark on his legacy. Additionally, Nika's Daddy Moro has assembled his brilliant together They push each other. It will be grander, larger, and more in June with Diver has created on this again. While Oscar is saying and Jacob Alro powerfully command the film as a protagonist, Chris contribute to the tragedy of the story in their own unique ways. Ed Asinger Hairlanders is a benefactor who has contracted Victor Frankenstein to complete his hypothesis which he attempted to defend in academia, but was oppressed for Harland is rich and obsessed with his stopping that and reserving life in every way that he can, including a reverse of the photography. As a Victor brother, he is loyal despite his fear of his brother. William Frankenstein hates Victor. Every is a woman of science, a lover of insect and freedom, and firmly pushes back against the violence of men and God, and then becoming an object of Victor's affection and obsession. As a film, there's a very little to find flaw. However, as the film began to invest in the larger set pieces in an action sense, the hard CG quality began to mar the experience. The only issue with the Frankenstein is how harshly the CG effect glaze the beauty of the practical work in the film. A master of practical effect, it is even more garish given their tourist for filmography. In fact, there are multiple moments throughout the movie that the film approach to a Gothic architecture would have felt more alive and beautiful if produced in the same way as Grimson Peak, leaving the gusto to make cleverly the creature's own mimics that of his maker from childlike wonder to villain. He undergoes the understanding that violence he subjected to form the world to his father is due to the simple act of existing. It's not that the creature is like that make him empathetic, but rather that he is coming to the realization. No thought of his own that he is to be the hated. The creator is stuck in a cycle of the violence born into it and then blamed for it all, while his father refuses to see how it all came to be. The creature may not be entirely human, but he is his father's son. Jacob performances have in the past been proper by his look. Frankenstein in turn present him with a unique opportunity. Where have the cause of lust and romance objectifying his body for audiences and character strength allow him to use his body. Javaron Erodi is some of the most beautiful out here. Thus it is running across curvature of his muscle, and the joint of his lime is centered his body, without sexualizing it, at least not with the same gaze we have seen him in before. Here, when intimacy and attraction are shown as subtle and simple, is a yearning to stop the loneliness, but an understanding just the same, and without sadness. We see here is a heartbreaking and a need for partner is not about lust, but about finally not being alone. The creature is alone his best role yet, and showcases how much he can do when trusted to be more than a face. His movements are unsure and uncanny, and his innocence is highlighted in all of this. The way Elro has controlled his body and his expressions changes as he grow until his humanity start to take shape as if molded out of a tree. Second time, Del Toro is not one of the subtitle. Why present the subtext when you can behold in your decision, and that is no different in Frank 2025. Yes, there are to see each scene. However, through color and framing, his story present a map in the Emerald and Scariot. Fing is a dual protagonist narrative. The film movies between the two of them is entering the focus as we view a new part in the cycle. Both men are unpacking their trauma with no understanding of what they have handed John or what they have received. Violence beget violence, and the years of perfection perpetuate it. For a storytelling perspective, that Jarl highlight a concept that he has long worked into many of his filmer. However, as he is a director to their gear shift, he points out he monsters that even human become. He asks us to empathize with their creature and their creation and understand our place among them. Not because they are innocent, but because both evolve, the hunter and the sheep all exist as they are, and a violent world writes to them. In many of the moment, when we see the cycle from father to son damage the next generation of Frankenstein, it's hard not to see a life that many men in my life have gone through, and Given both Isaac and Delo's cultural background a story about fatherhood takes on a separate land from those who grew up in the landed household. There is no absolution. There is no absolution intended to frank sense, but it is understanding trauma breaks us and the search for perfection rejecting the fingerprint it leaves only makes it borrow deeper if not for the choices made during this CGI sequences. His F would stand out beautifully, and there Juror's filmography still showcases why the Arua is the of monsters. Doro has taken Victor Frankenstein from mad scientist back to the dirt soul, and horror is better for it. Young Australian star Jacob Alroy's is one of the most disarming aspect of the Delu's board, visually stunning but frequently Jing work of Mary Shelley Springsteen. The Mexican director has chosen to emphasize the romanticism at the expense of the horror. Already player is a misunderstand. James is like all other very audible issues that are done as an agent of evil, and even if his face and torso are leadably scarce apples and suches, he is not only the most sympathetic character in the movie, but he the best looking one is. Left to Oscar is to provide real villain as a brilliant but agential scientist Victor Frankenstein who fathers the monster but then promptly disown him. AES are already so saved in Franken myth that is doubtful they can watch this film innocent eyes. They have had a universal movie yum fringing the hammer arrows cannot blunt stab the material poings and even anti-world's Frankenstein. This may will be a far more fateful interpretation of the novel that most of his predecessor, but that does not mean it can exercise their memory as Aqua Pharmacist is a mannered and uneven. The film code Aaron and Hoff expect Doctor to portray Victor as a dashing and poetic figure instead in the scene when Victor is a scientist scandalishing the medical establishment with his a galvanic experiment. He is strangely sinister as he rolled his eyeball fidget and jump around. It's very hard to much sympathy for him is registered much more strongly after Broadno when he is playing victim as a broken and despairing man with a prostatic leg on his game. Architect quest to destroy his creation. Far contemporary director can match the Toro's visual. Few contributor director can match the visual flair on his imagination. His film is full of apparently stacked set pieces. It opens in white and rosing fashion as Danish explorer discovered a badly wanted Victor and bring him aboard ship. So when the monster turns up to the cellar, do everything they can to wipe him out, but he keeps on coming back like AS that can never be removed in Minecraft. There is much to be admired here. Better is the battlefield where Victor goes in search of body part. Public hanging are still held. Every location is lovingly told. Costume and production design are impeccable, adapted, do their best to Christopher bring his family. Sorry to be the poet at the beginning, but I really did not care much of that Holo's personal revens at all. This not show Mama's Mar SHR director making the wholesale changes to just about every aspect of int text too. So but only a handful of names and setting for the book remain. In some ways, it's admirable that Deluro aimed to navigate his way through such a beloved next by substituting his own scene and ideas into the narrative. But as over 2.5 hours of such innovation, it becomes apparent that most if not all of his retailed his classic story in a way that is just not as good as the original book. You Are the Monster Franken is told at the end, and clicking back to the usual grown body glitches is what 255 version offering says finally washes up. This is a NIST movie, not a real film. So just about everything is green screen CG guy. Starting with the architect, a very a freeing shape to the horizon is locked in place by ice while the crews rescue the Baron from a fearsome badly monsters with a ticking clock before the undying monster can return the Baron, and then he is a locationeous monster unfolded backstory from the Baron's daddy issue with his cruel father to his friendship with an arms dealer. Hairlander's a part pornographer who provides fresh corpses for experiment from the ongoing slaughter of our even Barons makes brothers Gallon's precious ES alphabet. Even in a boho place like the Edinburgh, the parents' radical plan to reanimate corpses cast day stand in Alred, so he head out to a Dignite castle with an Elodia bam whole dage system where he create his monster, then reject it and then attempt to destroy it in a rather half-eat that allow you to escape and get revenge on him. No one can conquer that is a term warning that if Frank's sin does not hit, the overall arc is no different to other version, but the director aimed to change almost every note. Joe never saw a luminous dress to CGM, Adifs or a pet butterfly. He did not like some of the on-touches. Are amusing. One Night with the Venus, a Lifetime with Mercury harder creeps after skipping namely over a pool of blood, and as a treat French claim to man's dream. He exiled as he relieves himself in a port hangar. Is a more previously drawn character than contest Mary Glur. Only monsters play God, he's the parental takeaway, but this vaspish obsessive creature is not easy to empathize with, nor is he alro boring and past monster. Globing from his chain P in depth in Frank S.'s castle, there is code from the bar on Milton, one genuine mystery that he's a white El Toro who presumably loves SMA, is happy to create his own friends and monster for Netflix's who are mission to a complete against and destroy the very thing he loves so much is the one thing that God has granted us. Elizabeth says, but Delcha has a choice who is a work with, and it's hard to see that his floor style is helped by the Road Neff's house style hair of the town, transparently fixed backdrop, and the ridiculous airless that make up computer generation as the director bring the changes to the next text. But nothing is better than before. What differences does it make that Hellanders want to have his mind transported to the monster, or that Franken blame he monster for his friend's murder, or why Butter gives Frankson is a prosthetic leg and never mentioning it again, and yet he overlashes are intact. The monster learns to speak ridiculously easily from the usual blind hermit, and even after Frank Sands watches his creation son Byron Barr leaves him locked up in Pony Iron that don't hold him for a minute. Similarly, Guros construct an extra scene in which he franks and easily pulled the plug on his early creation, which make his reluctance to kill his creation hard to understand, and emphasizes on dead animal, horses, wolves, and corpses. Reply dollar call back to other version. I was a teenage fun adjust section, and Fong's final decision to call the monster his son feels completely unearned given to lack of context, scatter short approach to the adopting the classic story just as not to reanimate Frank's sense of his miserable looking monster. Oh, spoiler alert, turns out to be the goodie in the end, an elephant turn 152-minute film that gives him to most of an idea. Tell Frank is an undisciplined, self-regarding take on a great story that does not need such extraneous spell and whistle to capture the imagination. The most romantic relationship in Dolores Frankston is not between Victor Franken and his beloved Elabet, imagined here from childhood friend to his brother's fiancée, nor it is between the alphabet and the creature. Even she sees his beautiful soul. Not the most tender bond in the film is between the Koro and the monster. Dello's long-seeming adaptation. He has been talking about it in the various capities for at least 20 years. Foreground, the religious alleged allegory in Mary Charlotte's novel, as well as the creature's extensional torment. Some doctors' creation can be quiet, but Al is full of hurry and with supernatural sue and a healing ability, more suggestive of a superhero and a walking corpses. He roasts like a dragon as he rages across a permafrost searching for his creator. Despises his career. Hero of the place figure, the table open which he is. Discanoled in the shape of cross who come back from the dead kill his god. Like Scholl's novel during scene open in The Architect, where Creo, a sailor led by captain and her son, be witness to a violent confrontation once a cure catch up to Frank's then both side of the satisfactional fatter son to then tell the stories inside a warm confining captain's quarter. 86 While I roised the rough heaven wooden ceiling, the Famous seedle into two Victor Sale is full of the engaged, this time directed at his biological father's Leopold as a tricked and demanding Saran Ho Young. Victor blames for the death of his mother. This is one of the last Subul choices that Jaro make, but is nothing compared to the moment later on. John, Victor's younger brother's William, shot toward a real monster at his moody elder sibling. Yet high money dialogue about gods and monsters as a Franken, much of it delivered by Isaac as an arrogant young doctor who truly believes that he can improve on nature's flawed design. God is inabased. His mistakes. He cries shortly before being expelled from Edinburgh Medical School, where his story really began. Duras completely reimagined the portion of Scholl's novel where Dr. Frank sins actually can cure that, adding a new character, the deep-pocketed Indust, who come to the Frank scene with an offer of unlimited finding if he will low document his process. Islanders also has a crosses to slot of dead body which begin to pile up in a catacomb-like basement or the imposing stone tower where Dr. Franken does this work. There is some mumbling about she and the lymphatic system, but the real purpose of the lab is for Chas create a morbid aesthetic of a 19th century anatomical drawing. This is fair enough as the size is all made up anyway, and it is glistening bloodless beauty to the gray crops post like the sculpture made of rotting flesh, their skin peeled black to expose their brain and spinal column and fastened with fires in the intricate pattern. Daisy going dead crawls up the spine of Elabad grown. One of many symptoms detail in Disica filming and protesting design. Visually, Frank Sainz plays like Del Toro's greatest hit, The Flocked Velvet and A Grumbling Stone. Mary Shell's Goeg novel has lent itself to a number of on-screen interpretations from the screenplay. James Mary Shell's Kodak novel has lent itself to a number of on-ream interpretations, from the creepy James to the hilarious Smell Books 1974. Classic Young to the unintentionally hilarious Ken Banger's Native 94 Go Mary Chalice, as well as inspiring countless dramatic Rio join scenes somewhere near the top of Rappel with a messy but glore-curiously wizard mold drama. Will understand that as a core, Franksen is a cautionary tale about awful parenting, with Vector tell about the awful parenting with Vector task as a catastrophically useless father. All of his energies are focused on bringing him with the creature into the world, leaving him with validation gas left in the tank when it comes to actually nurturing or caring for the living being he has created. That all goes to the film's main female character, who perceives death as scientist and the word of love. But before we get to that, there is a creation scene which is a story equivalent of Harmless to be or not to the be, so the moment by which each version of Frank will be search and surprisingly Deluru are directed with a bad catalog that include the Chrono and the Davis Backbone 2001 does not shake the responsibility of delivering a memorably ably binary, but seeing the Preval sees Victor harvesting bodies by the dozen from a battlefield strewn with fresh corpses. There follow a Grom and Chicalpic snakes as likely looking parts are plugged from torsos. Sowable eyeball slaughtered merely into sockets, tendons, and his neck kneaded together. A lamb swad manically from there as well. Honor. You can hear the joint popping and cracking and practically smell the bone and marrow, and there is a gland switching on still to come. It is impossible to reimagine how their section could feel any more electrifying than the surgical preparation, but understand, and it's made the Toros show showmanship as your palm. Without oversharing, let's just say he deliver for all the chess of it. Practical effect. The film does not shy away from using CGI to augment the huge set with this workshop is closer to recite of a lavish era than the traditional laboratory depict in other films' version. There is logic to all his some drag beyond the snary's impact. However, the underlands and attention built by the violence of a creation set unexpectedly tender scene ahead. The creature first moment with his creator play like any broad father meeting his infant son for the first time. There is that and elated, proud and be.